Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zhang here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Ranked, where I climb the online Regulation D VGC ladder in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and provide live commentary as I go. In this video, I'm going to be using the team that Shohei Kimura used to win the 2023 Pokemon Video Game World Championships. The World Championships just concluded. I took a short break from YouTube to, of course, commentate the event, but it feels really good to be back. And Shohei has always been an exceptional player from Japan and used a very powerful team to climb all the way to the very top. As always, I'll do a quick breakdown of the team, but if you want to just skip to the battles, check out the timestamps down in the description below. And thank you so much, as always, for joining me. I've really missed making YouTube videos, so it feels good to be back. And if you enjoy, I'd really appreciate if you consider leaving a like in the video or subscribing to the channel. It really helps out a ton. Anyway, let's get started. Breaking things down now, as always, rental, pace, and team creator are linked down in the description below. And question of the day, I want to know what your favorite match from this year's World Championships were down in the comment section below. Now, I first want to talk a little bit about Shohei, our brand new world champion. He's been playing VGC for over 7 years at this point, and I remember commentating a world championship match of his in day one back in 2016. He's qualified for Worlds frequently, which already is really difficult to do from Japan, but he's always fallen a little bit short of making it to the final bracket stage. This year was his first time top cutting at Worlds, and he did not let his opportunity go to waste. He managed to secure an entire victory, obviously winning Worlds, and doing it in his home country of Japan. I want to talk a little bit about the overall idea behind Shohei's team first before diving into the specifics. If you look at these 6 Pokemon, they look like very standard Pokemon, and objectively, these are just some of the best Pokemon in the format. Shohei's approach for this Worlds was simply, I'm going to figure out how to use the best Pokemon better than everyone else. One thing to note about this World Championship was that it featured a brand new format in Regulation D, and that rule set was only introduced a couple of weeks before Worlds. So sometimes players try to approach Worlds by creating kind of anti-meta teams, but given the lack of a really established meta, and given that the meta just really started a couple of weeks ago, it makes a lot of sense that this approach ended up winning Worlds. One thing that I want to call out is that Shohei had so much nuance behind every EV spread, move choice, item, and Tera type on his team. And that goes a really long way, because for this Worlds, a lot of other players also decided, hey, I'm just going to use the same Pokemon. So how do you give yourself an edge to actually win? I'll talk about that a little bit as we dive into each individual Pokemon, and the first thing to highlight here is Landorus-T. Now, Landorus-T had been used by a bunch of different ways. We had seen, for example, Assault Vest as an item, we had seen Choice Scarf as an item, but this set carried Safety Goggles. Safety Goggles, such an important item, especially going into Worlds where Amoonguss was especially common, and tons of Japanese players were using Amoonguss in particular. And I think that's one reason why this team was able to win. It has a ton of anti-Amoonguss answers. You've got the Goggles on Landorus, the Taunt on the Urshifu, the Grass Tera on the Flutter main, as well as the Amoonguss. So you have a lot of ways to just completely wall opposing Amoongusses, right? Grass Tera, Flutter main plus Amoonguss, Landorus plus Amoonguss, Flutter main, Grass Tera plus Landorus, or Taunt from Urshifu. And it's kind of funny to cover that because Amoonguss was actually maybe the MVP of the finals matchup in the World Championships, but the team also just has a lot of anti-Amoonguss, which I think is really, really crucial. The main point about this Landorus is just to disrupt your opponent. U-turn can chip away, and of course, Cycle, Intimidate back in and out, and Stomping Tantrum just does consistent damage. You're going to Tera this, especially in matchups where Tera Blast has a lot of value, for example, against teams that prioritize Amoonguss or maybe Urshifu, for example. That can be super strong. The next Pokemon to talk about here is Urshifu. This Urshifu is not max speed. You have just enough speed investment to outspeed max speed. Armarouge and Infinity Armarouge was something that people were using going into Worlds, although obviously not that frequently, but you just cover for that, and then the rest distribute it in attack and bulk. With this amount of bulk, by the way, you can survive modest Pixie Plate Flutter main if you go for Water Tera, and you're guaranteed to survive that, which is really crucial. So what makes this Urshifu stand out is 1, the little bit of bulk that it has, as well as 2, Taunt. Taunt is such a valuable tool into things like Amoonguss, as well as Pokemon that want to set up, such as Trick Room users like Cresselia. And I think having that as a tool just is really valuable because there are so many Pokemon that can use non-attacking moves that really can be a nuisance to deal with otherwise. The interesting thing is you're dropping close combat, but I've never really missed close combat on this set, and Water Tera Surging Strikes with Mystic Water just does so much damage anyway. So there aren't that many games where I felt like I've missed it, but Taunt has given me a huge advantage in matchups where otherwise I'd feel pretty disadvantaged at. Flutter main is the next Pokemon to talk about, and I think that one of the reasons why this Flutter main won Worlds is because it's really speedy. It's timid 164 speed EVs. One thing to note is that Flutter mains, a lot of them had kind of traded EVs out of speed for bulk. And you still have a lot of bulk with this Flutter main, right? 68 HP, 140 special defense. With that, by the way, you survive Jolly, Chien Pao, Icicle Crash almost every time. It's a 6.3% chance to get a one-hit knockout, and that's really crucial. You also, even if they are admin, Chien Pao, for example, can still survive Icicle Crash. It just is a damage roll, so that's obviously a little bit scarier. But the general idea is to cover for Chien Pao outspeeding you and then going for Icicle Crash. And if they are admin, then you're going to be outpacing them, right? And so the main point I wanted to make is with this amount of speed investment, very few Flutter mains at Worlds, we're going to outspeed this Flutter. And so the main reason for that is because if you're running Timid Flutter, you generally want more speed than admin Chien Pao. Then the question is, how much speed investment do I actually run, right? And Shohei decided, I'm going to speed creep by a pretty significant amount because I really want to ensure that I have the faster Flutter main. Having the faster Flutter main in a Flutter versus Flutter mirror is really important because with that choice specs, you can just pressure them with a one-hit knockout. So I wouldn't be surprised if Shohei outsped the majority of Flutter mains at the World Championships. The other thing to talk about is the Grass Tera plus Energy Ball combination. Grass Tera was not that common on Flutter main before Regulation D, but as we headed into the World Championships, a lot of players started using it because, one, it's really good into Water Urshifu, especially since so many Water Urshifus just use Water Tera as their typing anyway. You can just nuke them with a Tera Grass Energy Ball. 2, with Grass Tera, you are immune to Spore and Rage Powder from Amoonguss. And 3, this gives you an amount of surprise burst damage onto water types such as Gastrodon or Dondozo. The next Pokemon to talk about is Chien Pao. This Chien Pao is also interesting because going into a World, a lot of people were using Icicle Crash, Crunch, Sucker Punch, and Protect. Ice Spinner is still occasionally used on Chien Pao, but most players started using Icicle Crash in Regulation D because Rocky Helmet Amoonguss is really common, and that breaks the Focus Sash on Chien Pao. It damages Chien Pao. Crash does a little bit more damage, obviously at the trade-off of some accuracy, but it can obviously also flinch, and that was very crucial in the World Championship Finals. Sacred Sword over Crunch, also a crucial decision here because it gives you a significant edge against opposing Chien Paos that don't run Sacred Sword. And so I think one of the calls that Shohei made at Worlds was, hey, I think I'm going to go up against a lot of Flutter mains. I think I'm going to go up against a lot of opposing Chien Paos. With this amount of speed investment and with Sacred Sword on Chien Pao, I should have a pretty significant edge against those. And I think that makes a lot of sense. To round things out, you've got Amoonguss. This Amoonguss, as you'll notice, also has a little bit of speed investment. The idea there is if you go up against opposing Amoongusses, you can outpace them and spore them should they Tera, which is a really big deal. With this amount of bulk on Amoonguss, you are guaranteed to survive Icicle Crash from Jolly Chien Pao, as well as obviously Ice Spinner from Jolly Chien Pao. And against Admin Max Attack Chien Pao, Icicle Crash only has a 1/4 chance to get a one-hit knockout onto you. Final Pokemon is Iron Hands. This is just objectively one of the best Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet VGC, right? It's just so bulky. It matches up super well into common meta Pokemon such as Chien Pao, such as Water Urshifu. And this Iron Hands really prioritized, first of all, having a lot of attack investment, as you'll notice. And the more attack, the better chance you have of just getting a knockout onto Urshifu with Wild Charge, which is really crucial. And decent amount of speed investment here to also outspeed opposing Iron Hands, which I think is nice. So tons of different ways that you can play with this team. I would really recommend just watching the VODs from the World Championships and seeing how Shohei approached it. But I think the strength of this team is that you can truly lead any combination and it can work. And that the flexibility, I think, is really important. And that's why one of the reasons why I was able to win this World Championship in a format that was brand new, had a lot of diversity in terms of team picks and Pokemon picks. It's nice to have a team that feels like can give you a neutral, if not favorable matchup into most things that you'll run into. So yeah. That's it for a quick breakdown. Now let's highlight some weaknesses. In terms of weaknesses, the first thing that I want to stress is that this team was built for the World Championships, which is an open team sheet best of 3 tournament. So with that, you might not have as much success on ladder with it in a closed team sheet environment where it's best of 1, especially now that this team won Worlds. It is the most high profile team and everyone's going to be preparing for it. So I think it was able to win Worlds because in an open team sheet environment, you just have so much power to choose from between all of the Pokemon. But it can be a lot harder to use in best of 1. And for that reason, I actually have not had like the most success with it on ladder. I feel like I've maybe had like a 60-65% win rate with it, which is decent, but for a team that won Worlds is actually probably not as high as I would have expected. And I'll list some things that I've really struggled against in a closed team sheet environment. The first is just Tornadus teams. This team doesn't have speed control, so it can be pretty scary to go up against Tornadus teams that can just overwhelm you with offense. Now, there are a lot of Tornadus teams at Worlds, and obviously this team was able to beat a lot of those teams in order to win the championship. But in an open team sheet environment, just knowing whether or not, for example, Tornadus has Taunt, knowing whether or not there's a random Safety Goggles on your opponent's team can give you a huge advantage. In a closed team sheet environment, I've often brought Amoonguss, and Amoonguss is just left completely useless, so it can really sway the matchup significantly. I've also gone up against a lot of Pokemon that just have Choice Scarf. For example, Choice Scarf Water Urshifu, Choice Scarf Golden Go, Choice Scarf Landorus Therian, and all of those Pokemon have the ability to just get surprise knockouts onto this team, and I think playing around potential Scarfs is something that stressed me a lot when using this team on ladder in particular. I've also gone up against some things such as Dondozo with Grass Tera plus Oblivious and Leftovers. Really struggled against that because it generally has a good matchup against a lot of the team. You can still have answers into it, such as Landorus with the Flying Tera Blast, as well as Chien Pao with Icicle Crash. But, for example, when you're up against Dondozo, not knowing what Tera type alone makes it a little bit harder to play against. Indeedee Armourouge, I think, can also actually be a little scary for this team because you can't actually stop the Expanding Forces very easily. And if you don't lead Chien Pao, for example, Expanding Force spam is just really strong. Chien Pao can't get rid of the Psychic Terrain either because it doesn't have Ice Spinner, and you don't have Crunch on the Chien Pao as well. So that's one thing to watch out for. But, yeah. I think on average, this team will give you the tools to potentially beat any team, but in best of one, you really have to be careful because there are a lot of things that can catch you off by surprise and just win the game for your opponent immediately, and that's generally what I've struggled with the most. And once again, just keep in mind that you don't really have any speed control with this team, so there are going to be a fair number of games where you are going to get outsped, for example, by your opponent's Chien Pao because they're Jolly Chien Pao, or they have Tailwind with Tornadus, for example, or Icy Wind support. So, yeah. Those are just a couple things that I've noted and that I've run into, but let's get into these battles. Well, this feels fitting. We have an exact mirror match, which, by the way, actually happened at the semifinals of the World Championships. One thing that was really interesting about that semifinals was seeing the impact of Taunt Urshifu. So I think there's a bunch of things that can happen in this matchup. I think one lead is just going for Flutter immediately with Amoonguss. The idea behind this is if the opposing side leaves Amoonguss, the Flutter just applies immediate pressure. Something like Flutter plus... Like, what could counter this on their end, right? Like, Chien Pao is pretty scary. Their Urshifu could Tera, and that's scary. But I could just Grass Tera Energy Ball that slot, I suppose. So I want to go with Flutter Amoonguss, Urshifu, and then Chien Pao is the fourth. I think in this matchup, Iron Hands is interesting. The problem with it is that it's really, really weak into Amoonguss. If you're bringing it out, you have to cycle in and out properly. Landorus is okay, but... Actually, Landorus is really valuable because of Safety Goggles, now that I think about it. The main thing about it is, like, how do you bring it out without taking too much damage? Because, like, Chien Pao can just Icicle Crash that slot. Flutter generally does a lot into that slot as well. And then the opposing Landorus is also kind of awkward. So... I think it's a really interesting Pokemon in this matchup because of the goggles specifically. Amoonguss is just such a big piece of this team, and it was interesting to see how both players had brought it, I think, in game one of the semifinals, and then you had this weird Urshifu versus Urshifu war where, like, the mind game of Taunt in itself was just really amusing. So, let's see. That's going to be Amoonguss coming out immediately, and Flutter main. Oh, boy. Well, that's funny. Like, I wonder if I ever don't even bother going for a Tera here. So I could conserve my Tera on one of these. I wonder if they bother even Rage Powdering. I think, like, the safe bet is to Grass Tera here. Moonblast. And Pollen Puff, expecting them to go for a Grass Tera of their own. Yep, they are going to Tera. Okay. Super interesting we ended up on the same lead. I think Landorus as a lead here would have been really strong because I could just Flying Tera Tera Blast immediately, but the question is, how confident do you feel about leading Landorus into this matchup? I think one of the other interesting questions here is, what does their Amoonguss do? Do we both just trade Flutter mains on turn one? If so, that's not the end of the world, right? I'll have gotten some... then the question is, do we bring the exact same Pokemon? Okay, they actually go for Shadow Ball. That works for me. No special defense drop, which is huge. And as you can see, Moonblast does more. Drops the special attack, but I think Pollen Puff actually gets the KO here anyway. I am mainly curious if they ended up clicking Spore on Tower's side, Pollen Puff on Tower's side, or Pollen Puff onto their side. Because I actually think if I went for Shadow Ball plus Pollen Puff, I would not have gotten the knockout onto their Flutter main. Yep, they Pollen Puff us. Do we survive here? This is such an interesting turn because it goes to show the difference between Shadow Ball and Moonblast, right? Because I clicked Moonblast, the extra little bit of base damage from that gave me the edge so that the Moonblast plus Pollen Puff combo would knock out. So mirror matches are really interesting. This one is scary, right? Because we have the same speed stat essentially. They actually brought Landorus in this matchup as well. Okay. This is where if I had Landorus, I would just be so well positioned because I have the Pokemon lead right now. But I think it's still fine. Because their Landorus moveset is Stomping Tantrum, Tera Blast, U-Turn, Protect. So it's like, for example, first Moonblast into the Landorus slot, pretty guaranteed. And then I can just go for a Pollen Puff onto their Amoonguss to put it in KO range of Icicle Crash. So the thing about a mirror match is you really have to think about how you can gain an advantage against your opponent. Given that we led the exact same thing, that turn one was really interesting because I think there's a chance in which we just trade Pokemon, right? The thing that's critical in this matchup, in my opinion, though, is that they brought Landorus, and I think me having Urshifu and Chien Pao in the back makes it significantly better for me. So I end up wasting the Moonblast into the Protect, but I'm honestly fine with that because I think Landorus just is not the strongest option for my opponent in general, right? Now I get a free switch into Chien Pao, which is really, really good. I could also just bring out Urshifu and Taunt into them. I think that's some interesting consideration as well. But I don't know. I personally think just bringing Chien Pao here is fine. I do think my opponent can make a comeback from this position, so I got to be careful. The other thing to consider is that the Landorus slot had just gone for a Protect. So I think I could also consider going for Icicle Crash onto that slot and Spore onto that slot. If you go for Rage Powder, that's totally great. I knock out Amoonguss, and then, yeah, I don't like get a Spore off into this, but then I have a really good matchup into the final Pokemon. I could just Icicle Crash into Amoonguss, but I think Amoonguss switching out into Urshifu right now would be a problem for me, so I don't mind doubling up onto Landorus. Essentially with this, I'm saying I either knock out your Landorus or I put what you switch into to sleep. What I really don't want to happen is Icicle Crash into Amoonguss, Amoonguss protects or switches out into Urshifu, and then Landorus gets a Stomping Tantrum off. But they just go for Rage Powder, which I think is actually one of the better outcomes for us. The main thing that was scary there is missing Icicle Crash, but we're not going to miss, and that's a knockout onto their Amoonguss. Perfect. Okay, presumably Stomping Tantrum here, but okay, it's going to be U-turn. Yeah, actually, that makes more sense. You cycle in and out for Intimidate. So let's see what their last one is. I would expect it to be their own Urshifu. But we have a Pokemon advantage right now, which is pretty significant. Oh, it's Chien Pao. Okay. Well, with that, yeah, because I Spored, I actually just put you to sleep as well. So that was the other thing. If they had stayed in and clicked Stomping, I at least don't put you to sleep. But now the game's just over, I'd say. Because you can't Protect with the Chien Pao, so I can just Sacred Sword and Pollen Puff you. So this is why I think mirror matches are so interesting in Pokemon, right? In the end, it didn't actually really come down to any RNG. Like, there was the potential speed ties on turn 1. I think that was probably what was scariest about this game. But the fact that there were a bunch of things that distinguished the different sides in this game, right? So, like, for example, from my side, I went for the Moonblast rather than Shadow Ball. That gave me the extra bit of damage I needed to knock out Flutter Mane. And then I also brought Chien Pao and Urshifu. Now, I think I felt really good about the end game because I had both of those. Like, Landorus is really valuable to counter Amoonguss, but it's just not very good if you don't use your Tera on it. And, like, Urshifu and Chien Pao can just kind of one-shot the Landorus, right? So, yeah, they protect Landorus, but I'm always doubling up onto Urshifu here, onto Chien Pao here, knowing that you can't protect with that slot. So Sacred Sword to bring you down to Sash, and then I just knock you out, and then I just Icicle Crash into Landorus. But it is, I think, very interesting that we both decided on the same Flutter Mane plus Amoonguss lead, because I think the leads are actually a really big deal in this matchup. So then, like, if you wanted to make an adjustment against that lead, I think leading Chien Pao immediately is really interesting. I think leading Landorus is also interesting because it puts on offensive pressure against both. You can Tera Blast into either slot, for example. So, yeah. Now we can just go for Icicle Crash onto the Landorus slot and Pollen Puff for some free chip. If Icicle Crash misses, it's fine. I just bring out Urshifu and just click Surging Strikes, which will get a knockout anyway. And this Landorus is just not nearly as strong if you can't Tera it, right? Like, you're basically using just Stomping Tantrum and U-turn. And Icicle Crash is not going to miss here, so we should just get that knockout cleanly. Perfect. So yeah, that was one of the other things, right? It's like, Safety Goggles is a valuable item, but because this Landorus does like to cycle in and out a lot, like that Spore that turn wasn't even really to protect a U-turn. It was more just, I was expecting Landorus to go for a hard switch, but by them going for U-turn instead of stomping Tantrum, I think we just win the game basically immediately. But I think even if they hadn't done that, I was still in really good shape because I could just go for, with my Amoonguss, for example, Spore onto their Chien Pao, and then Icicle Crash into the Landorus slot the subsequent turn. And late game Urshifu with Rage Powder support from Amoonguss is also really powerful. So, yeah. But I think it goes to show how interesting mirror matches can be because we ended up bringing different Pokemon, one different Pokemon, and then our turn one's plays were different. And then that just, like, completely, I would say, gave me control of this match. I think the main thing was, yeah, they made a great protect play with the Landorus. I just like really didn't want to get careless with the Flutter. Of course, I could have switched out Flutter into Chien Pao or Urshifu, but if I get Spored as I switch out, I think it's a big disaster. So in that position, it's like, okay, might as well just give it up, try to get some free damage on the Landorus. And then Pollen Puff chipping Amoonguss is also really nice, just so that I can have more confidence with getting a knockout with Icicle Crash. Okay, we've got Grimmsnarl here with Urshifu, Cresselia, Indeedee, Armarouge, Iron Hands. Grim is kind of annoying, but obviously being able to crit through everything with Urshifu is a pretty big deal. I'm thinking of leading Fluttermane just because it applies so much offensive pressure. And if like it forces a light screen out, then it only helps against Flutter and the rest of my Pokemon. Like the physical attackers just don't really care. It's an interesting one. Like, yeah, I like the Urshifu Flutter lead. Landorus? Not that great. Like, I want to bring Amoonguss. I think I don't want to bring Landorus. I think I want, like, 2 of the 3 from down here. AV Hands, though, it doesn't feel that good. I don't know. None of these actually feel that great. This matchup feels kind of awkward to me. I think I'm going to bring Amoonguss because it covers for them going for Trick Room at least. Chien Pao's just awkward, honestly, because I don't have Crunch. So I think I'm actually going to go with Hands. Yeah. If Chien Pao had Ice Spinner or Crunch here, I think it is a lot stronger. But with the lack of both of those, I just think it doesn't make as much sense. And, like, Indeedee is a problem. I think Urshifu and Flutter are probably the 2 most important Pokemon from my side. So it's really, really crucial that I don't give them up too early. It's just Indeedee Armarouge, huh? Okay. It's pretty scary, honestly. What would I do if I were my opponent? Like, you could just follow me Trick Room. I have to make a big play on turn 1, it feels like, honestly. Okay, I went Moonblast Surging Strikes here onto Armarouge. They're going to go for a Tera. So I thought you could go for Water Tera on Indeedee here. No, but it's on Armarouge. Okay. Into Psychic. So they're just going for Follow Me Expanding Forest, right? That would be my guess. Yeah, honestly, this is really scary. I think, I don't know, maybe like I could have led Chien Pao. This might just get a double knockout. Were you Rocky Helmet as well? Yeah. How do I lead into Indeedee Armarouge with Psychic Tera? It's not that easy. It's actually a really challenging lead duo, I would say. Especially with Psychic Tera. The question is whether or not I can survive with Flutter right now. I definitely didn't expect Psychic Tera here. Yeah, that is very, very strong. My answer against this would have either been leading Chien Pao. It would have been something like Chien Pao Flutter, Chien Pao Landorus, Chien Pao Urshifu. I don't know. It's actually really hard. Especially with Psychic Tera. Like, Psychic Tera gives you the extra damage that you need to knock me out, even if I defensively Tera with anything. not anything. Amoonguss and hands actually could defensively Tera, but like they don't do much in return, right? So, wow. I didn't realize just how strong NED Armourouge was, but my goodness. And I'm just weak to Expanding Force with both of these. It's just like Chien Pao felt so awkward to bring, right? Because even if I had Chien Pao, I wouldn't be able to click Sucker Punch or Sacred Sword. I guess I would be able to Icicle Crash, but it's like if this doesn't Tera, it's also kind of useless. I don't actually even see an out here. I feel like I need a Tera here and Spore. Plus Wild Charge, and the hope is just that, like, somehow Iron Hand survives a turn. But, yeah, I think Psychic Tera specifically is... Like, for example, if Psychic Tera didn't exist and I had Flutter out and I could just get another Moonblast off and Water Tera Amoonguss, this game would actually be completely different. But the fact that the Armourouge was able to get a one-hit knockout onto the Flutter main is what makes this basically a done deal. And they have Calm Mind Cresselia, which is not good for us. So, triple Psychic here, but with no crunch on the... Oh, we are faster. Wait. Interesting. Or are they Trick Rooming? Nope, they're just Expanding Forcing. Okay. I mean, I still lose if that KOs Iron Hands, right? So they're just Min Speed Armourouge, probably Max Bulk. Yeah, look how strong Psychic Tera is. They literally picked up 3 one-hit knockouts with Armourouge in 2 turns. My gosh. And once again, I can't like stress enough how much of a difference Psychic Tera makes. Because I really think if Flutter survives that turn, this is a completely different game. Right, because I bring out Flutter, I can just Moonblast into the Armourouge and Spore that slot after Water Tera, bring out Hands. The problem is I'm not even sure Hands and Amoonguss can pull off the comeback. But Pokemon is a game about matchups, right? And if you wanted to improve this matchup with the same 6 Pokemon, what you can do is put Ice Spinner on Chien Pao and put Crunch on Chien Pao. I would not be surprised if my opponent has obviously seen this team, given that it just won the World Championship. So knowing that the Chien Pao doesn't have Crunch or Ice Spinner completely changes how you can play with that team. And as a result, you can see how confident they were in leading NDD plus Armourouge, right? Because if Chien Pao does have Crunch or it has the Ice Spinner, it's actually a very different matchup, right? Because I can just get rid of Terrain immediately. You can't spam Expanding Force. Chien Pao's immune to the Expanding Force. But Chien Pao feels really awful to bring in this matchup because I can't get rid of Terrain. Sacred Sword and Sucker Punch just not that valuable. Sucker Punch not valuable at all. So my best bet is clicking Icicle Crash, but it's not really doing that much damage to my opponent's Pokemon anyway. So yeah, I think one thing that's interesting is that on Chien Pao, you do have the decision to make on Ice Spinner versus Crash, Crunch versus Sucker Punch, maybe Crunch and Sucker Punch, and whether or not you want Sacred Sword. And the standard Chien Pao, which obviously is on this team that ended up winning Worlds, has kind of a better matchup spread against everything, right? Like Sacred Sword's really valuable specifically into opposing Chien Paos, for example. But into NDD Armourouge, the matchup is so much worse now because we don't have those moves. So yeah, honestly, it is. I don't even like. I'm trying to think what I would do differently if I were to play this game again, and it's really challenging. I think maybe leading Chien Pao works. Like we have to trade positively. So I think what I would do is aggressively try to knock out NDD on turn 1. For example, lead Chien Pao plus Landorus. Actually, no. I think I would probably go. I guess I could go Chien Pao Landorus, but then I would Icicle Crash U-turn. But then I'd have to sacrifice something, right? So maybe it's something like Chien Pao plus Flutter, Icicle Crash plus Moonblast turn 1, knock out NDD, they Expanding Force to knock out Flutter, and then I have Urshifu next to Chien Pao. And then with that, I can go for like Water Tera, and then Surging Strikes onto Armourouge, and then Amoonguss as the 4 to cover for the Trick Room option. I think that's what I would do if I were to replay this, but it was really tough, right? Because in Team Preview, I also don't know if Cresselia has the Rocky Helmet or NDD has Rocky Helmet. Ended up being NDD. And so, yeah, honestly, like that's a match I don't have any shame in losing because I think it's, 1, really hard to see the Psychic Tera coming, and 2, with the Chien Pao not running Crunch or Ice Spinner, the matchup is just not very favorable for us. But that being said, you should always think about how you can win even after bad matchups. And like I said, I think the approach is to trade aggressively against NDD turn 1 to leave Armourouge exposed on turn 2. So I can just aggressively target that slot down. And then Amoonguss for a late game Spores can be valuable as well. Like it felt like Urshifu and Chien Pao still a decent combo, especially because they were Calm Mind Cresselia. I think then my question becomes what kind of moves does Cresselia have? Normally it's Psychic or Moonblast, for example. So yeah. Okay, we've got Mousehold. I haven't seen the mouse in a while. That is probably my favorite Pokemon from Scarlet and Violet. I just love it. Thunderous Cresselia Heatran, which reminds me of VGC 2012-13, and then Urshifu Rillaboom plus the Mousehold. So, what do we think here? Taunt Urshifu is interesting, but I have to worry about just Wild Bolt Storm in general. And electric type attacks from Thundurus. I think Landorus Flutter is a decently consistent lead for me here. I want Iron Hands in the back, I think. It's just got so much defense. Landorus Flutter lead. This allows me to U-turn out. I can go into Hands, can go into Amoonguss if I want to bring it. I don't know how I feel about Amoonguss in this matchup, though. I think I prefer Chien Pao or Urshifu here. And I think I lean more towards Chien Pao because Chien Pao is super good into Thundurus. Being immune to the Prankster attacks from Thundurus on Chien Pao is a pretty sweet deal. So, let's see how this plays out. Mouse Hold is what I'm mainly curious about. Its usage in general kind of fell off in Regulation D, but I think Population Bomb on it actually is kind of underrated. So they're going to go with the Rillaboom and the Cresselia. Okay, that works for me. Yep, Landorus is faster than Rillaboom based on the abilities activating in that order. I don't know. I don't hate a hard switch into Iron Hands and then just go for the Choice Spec Shadow Ball into Cresselia. Like, it's not going to knock out Cresselia, but it's going to do really meaningful damage. And the main thing is, does Rillaboom just like fake out into Landorus? Because if they fake out into that, I'm going to be incredibly well positioned. One play I could have made was flying Tera Blast into Cresselia, and then Shadow Ball as well, which would probably KO Cresselia if they weren't tearing this turn. I guess it could also be Sitrus Berry, so they survive Spec Shadow Ball and then heal back enough where they survive Tera Blast. But Fake Out goes into Hands, which is exactly what we want to see. So it's a free Spec Shadow Ball into Cresselia. Not going to knock out, but that's fine. It's a lot of damage. Yeah, look how much that is. Actually gets a special defense drop as they set up Trick Room. Cool. Pretty lucky special defense drop, although even if they went for Lunar Blessing, I'd KO them the next turn anyway. Right now, it's a pretty free Fake Out into Rillaboom. Shadow Ball into Cresselia. Alternatively, though, like, let's say I wanted to predict my opponent to pivot out Rillaboom. Like, one play I could make right now is actually Wild Charge into Cresselia, knock that out, and Shadow Ball into Rillaboom. The main advantage of this is if I think Rillaboom ends up switching out this turn. The safer play, though, is to just Fake Out into Rillaboom, Shadow Ball into Cress. I'm fine making a safe play here this turn. Because I think Rillaboom might still be incentivized to stay in and try to click Woodhammer onto the Flutter. But I wouldn't be shocked if that switches out into, say, like, Heatran. But they stay in, which is great news for us. Okay. Yep, and they just Lunar Blessing, which is fine. So, in the end, that special defense drop actually ended up not mattering because a Spec Shadow Ball would KO Cresselia anyway. So I'm fine with this outcome as Rillaboom flinches and will knock out Cresselia. So I think turns 1 and 2 have played out really well for us. Cresselia is a pretty difficult Pokemon to eliminate, and with the team that we're using, I don't actually have that much super effective damage into it, especially because the Chien Pao does not have Crunch. So being able to KO it that early, I think is really good for us. Heatran pivots in, which is fine. So we haven't taken damage yet. Like, I think Landorus switching in here is fairly safe. 3 turns of Trick Room left. I'm personally happy, I think, to Drain Punch the Rillaboom, or sorry, the Heatran, and then switch out into Landorus. It's like Rillaboom will be at -2 attack, so that really won't be dealing too much damage. And this is why bringing Iron Hands in the matchup was really important. If I went with the full offensive mode and the fast mode of my team, I'd kind of get swept under Trick Room, but the Iron Hands just doesn't take that much damage and can heal up with Drain Punch, which is really critical here. They actually don't go for a Tera, and as you can see, my Hands just outspeeds them, so beautiful. Heatran's going to go for a Heat Wave, gets a crit onto Landorus, okay. The crit's pretty unfortunate because I think without the crit I survived the Woodhammer Heat Wave double, but it's fine. That is pretty frustrating though, because it would just allow me to stall out their Trick Room a little bit easier. But it's fine because I know that I have the free switch into Chien Pao now. Yeah. So I'll bring out Chien Pao. I think the main debate with bringing Chien Pao out now is what is their final Pokemon. Still 2 more turns of Trick Room. So for example, I think Rillaboom switching out here makes a ton of sense. Maybe you U-turn out. Do you U-turn or hard switch? I just think Heatran protecting here is going to happen pretty much every time. So personally, I'm interested in clicking like Drain Punch onto the Rillaboom slot and then protecting with Chien Pao. Or not even protecting with Chien Pao, honestly. I actually just swapped to the obvious play of Drain Punch, Icicle Crash, and looks like it's going to pay off. Yeah, they did not protect Heatran. Wow. So now my question is Rillaboom U-turning? Because if you're just staying in here, that's just fainting. That's just game over, it feels like. Yep, they do U-turn though. Okay. That's why I was thinking about protecting Chien Pao. So this does grant them a free switch in. I think Urshifu would be their best option by far right now. Yep. Okay. But we knocked out Heatran, so that was good for us. Icicle Crash. Still decent damage. Okay, my opponent could definitely still win this one, so we're not in the clear just yet. I think if I had protected there, we'd be in super good shape, because then you just don't get to cycle Fake Out, but now you can Fake Out onto my Iron Hands. It's the last turn of Trick Room. They didn't Tera, Cresselia, or Heatran, so this going for Water Tera is still definitely possible. Fake Out into Iron Hands and just Surging Strikes into Chien Pao feels pretty strong, right? So I could switch in Flutter, sacrifice that to get Chien Pao out back safely. Question is which one of these two I want in the end game. Actually, because I have Grass Tera on Flutter, I think that's going to be really good in the end game. So I'm down to just Wild Charge and Icicle Crash with the expectation of losing the Chien Pao right now. And the main reason is because I think with Grass Tera, I can just win with a combination of Grass Tera plus the Flutter. Also, the upside of going for Icicle Crash there is we don't know what the item on Urshifu is, so if they were Choice Scarf, that would also be really good for us, right? We would just knock out Rillaboom. But now I confirm they're not Scarfed, which is fine. Yeah, so now I get to show the trick of the Flutter main with the Grass Tera Energy Ball. It's valuable in this format for so many different reasons, one being the Urshifu matchup. So I'm happy to just Drain Punch into Rillaboom, Tera Grass, and then Energy Ball. The main awkward thing is obviously by going for this, my Energy Balls into Rillaboom aren't going to do that much damage. But the only way they could get around this play is if they were to protect Urshifu and go for either like a U-turn or if they had Drum Beating onto Flutter. Otherwise, this covers for pretty much anything they could do. And I mainly went for the Tera here, expecting their Urshifu to consider going for like a Water Tera to get around the Choice Specs Moonblast, for example. Okay, Urshifu just goes for Protect. That's fine, though. Another Energy Ball will just finish you off. Mainly curious if they click like Wood Hammer here. And the thing is, I feel pretty confident in the Iron Hands versus Rillaboom 1v1 because I can just Drain Punch and sustain from that. So, yep, there's the Wood Hammer, but Grass Tera saves us here. Beautiful. Now I get a Drain Punch into Rillaboom, and look how much damage that does. This is why the Iron Hands just has so much attack investment, right? Okay, so I'm just going to go for another Drain Punch on a Rillaboom and then Energy Ball into Urshifu. I could lose to either a double Protect, although even if they were to double, I think it'd be okay because we would just trade knockouts, and then I would think I would win the 1v1 against Urshifu. I'm more worried about a random Tera on Urshifu right now. Almost all Water Urshifus just run Water Tera, which is why this play was generally pretty safe. But you can see the value of Grass Tera on Flutter main, right? That's a very distinct choice going into the World Championships. That plus the combination of Energy Ball is a big decision. So here's the Tera. It could just be Water Tera and then they try to Aqua Jet us, but I would expect to survive that. Beautiful. Okay, I was a little bit worried about something like a Steel Tera there. It may have been better to try to double up on Urshifu, but in my head I was like, even if you have a defensive Tera, as long as I knock out Rillaboom, it's fine. So yeah, they're just going to go for the Aqua Jet play. But I would expect to survive this. Beautiful. This is where the bulk on Flutter is just such a big deal. So we survive Wood Hammer plus Aqua Jet. I get the super effective Energy Ball into Urshifu. Hands will knock out the Rillaboom. And folks, that's why you use the Grass, Tera, Energy Ball, Choice Specs, Flutter main set. And there's a reason why this set won the World Championships. In a format where you have so many different Pokemon that can hit Flutter for neutral damage normally, Grass allows you to resist a lot of that. And Water and Grass are pretty common typings. Of course, one of the other advantages of the Grass Tera is to help you get around Amoonguss, and that's a really big deal as well because Amoonguss is everywhere. So it just happened to be the perfect meta call for the World Championships this year, and I'm glad to demonstrate its strength in this endgame here as well. This is a really cool team. Rillaboom, Salamence, Hisuian Arcanine, Chien Pao, Urshifu, Farigiraf. Very cool. We saw Hisuian Arcanine win the Senior Division World Championship Finals. I got to commentate about that, by the way. It was so fun. Really, really cool. Hisuian Arcanine and Sylveon were used flawlessly as well as Zapdos in that. And it was just a really cool, I would call, anti-meta team. Farigiraf also very interesting. And of course made it to the Master Division Finals. Blocking priority. What do I want to lead with here? Arcanine is a really big problem for Fluttermane, which otherwise would be really good. And this actually happened in the senior finals, right? Where basically it was like Flutter looks really good into everything, but then Arcanine came out. Arcanine just put so much pressure onto that one slot specifically. I think if I go with Urshifu, though, I can at least bait out a Tera from the Arcanine immediately. This also could be a game for Landorus now that I look at it. I don't know, it's a really interesting team from my opponent. I don't know how to play this just from team preview. I'm thinking the top 4 Mons. Amoonguss is a little tricky to bring, but I guess I could Tera and get a Spore off. Okay, I'm thinking Landorus, Flutter, Chien Pao, Urshifu. I think Amoonguss is... I really should be bringing it now that I think about it. The main awkward thing is if I Tera Water Amoonguss, it becomes weak to Rillaboom. And their team is so physical, which is why really valuable Landorus on my side in this matchup. Salamence Farigiraf, fascinating. Right, I mean, that feels like they want to go with Trick Room, right? Their Salamence is faster than us. So you do have speed investment on that. Don't mind U-turning here. I'm gonna be shocked if this had like Tera Blast, Steel Tera, but even then, do I care? I don't think so. I just don't think U-turn Specs Moonblast gets to KO here. But I don't think Salamence is really a threat to me at all, so I'm still down to try it. Maybe I should have brought Amoonguss though. I honestly didn't think they would try to like play towards Trick Room here, but this actually looks pretty scary right now. Okay, they go for a Tera, but is it Salamence Terraing? If it's that, then it's honestly fine. Yep. Not a problem for me right now. Steel Tera. Okay. I think Protect and then Steel Tera, Tera Blast, and a Flutter is pretty strong. Mainly curious if they protect it with Farigiraf. No Protect, okay. So I get my Specs Moonblast off. I think they survive U-turn here. Ooh, it's Sitrus Berry. Okay. Yeah, then you're definitely surviving the turn. Ah, they go for Tailwind. That's really cool. And then Psychic into Flutter, okay. Which we take pretty comfortably. Actually, without Sitrus, Farigiraf would have been really close to getting KO'd. Such an interesting start. That's really cool. Okay. Psychic plus the Salamence honestly is a little scary right now. I won't lie. I think I want to bring out Urshifu first. I love that manual Tailwind from Salamence with the not the Specs, with Steel Tera. So I would expect like Terabast right now into Flutter. I wonder if you actually even double up onto that slot. I think switching back out into Landorus on my end right now is fairly safe. The question is whether or not I Protect right now, because I'm also thinking about just clicking Surging Strikes into Farigiraf. But do I really want to blow my Tera as well? I think it's worth it. Surging Strikes and then go into Landorus. Because I think late game Chien Pao Flutter cleans my opponent up. The only way this play doesn't work is if they, like, double up onto Urshifu on turn 1. Not turn 1. Or, like, yeah, on this first turn of Tailwind. Second turn, I guess. Because, yeah, last turn counted. I also want to just get rid of Freegraph because it opens priority up for me so I can start Sucker Punching and Aqua Jetting. And I'm going for a Tera here to not just feint to a Psychic. I just really didn't want to protect and then have my opponent double up onto the Landorus slot. I think that gets really ugly for me then. Especially with the inability to protect with the Flutter main. Okay, they go for Iron Head. Perfect. That's why we brought Landorus back out. Beautiful. And they did just Psychic into Urshifu. Okay. So, I was probably fine off just protecting there, but I also think accelerating the pace of this is fine. We'll get a knockout onto Freegraph, and as you can see, we needed the Tera to survive the Psychic there. So, still need to stall out Tailwind, but I can double protect, obviously, this next turn. Landorus also now can just Stomping Tantrum into the Dragonite slot. Not Dragonite, Salamence slot. I was like, forget Dragonite. We have Salamence and Chien Pao. The main thing is, like, what is Salamence actually running here? We saw Iron Head, Tailwind. Like, if it's Dragon Claw Protect, then this thing actually doesn't really do damage. So you can only get a knockout onto one side with Chien Pao. Let's see, 2 turns of Tailwind. Like, I'm thinking about actually playing aggressively this turn and just attacking. What do we think Salamence would switch out into, by the way? Rillaboom or their Urshifu? Yeah, I'm actually going to U-turn and Surging Strike Chien Pao. Ah! That's cool. It's funny because, like, Haze has really fallen out of popularity as they actually dual Wing Beat. That is really interesting. Okay. Very cool. Yeah, so, like, Haze isn't as popular because, like, Dondozo in Regulation D just isn't as popular. But I'm fine with this outcome, right? I get a U-turn off into Chien Pao, and I do a lot of damage with that. I can cycle my Chien Pao back in and bring out Landorus, and then just double protect. That Haze was really cool, though. Okay, so we bring Chien Pao out. I get Landorus out. I'd say this turn is interesting because it's like me double protecting is kind of a fairly obvious play. You could also double up onto my Chien Pao slot. Big question is, what is their final one? I think Urshifu still makes a lot of sense. I will say, I think if their last one is Scarf Urshifu, this is actually getting kind of spooky for me. I mean, I'm thinking about just double protecting right now, but I'm wondering if I actually need to do that. Part of me wants to attack here with both Mons, actually. It's probably better to just double protect here, though. I'm wondering if they actually go for a Haze again. Salamence switches out, which I think is smart. Urshifu? Oh, it's Arcanine. Interesting. Okay. So this is going to be quite the close endgame then. A little bit worried about Chien Pao speed ties. I think that's my primary concern right now. Because, like, Stomping Tantrum into the Arcanine slot is really safe. Yeah, so the Ice Spinner into Landorus, which makes sense. So I could have protected Sacred Sworder there, which I think would put me in a really winning position. But we've stalled out Tailwind now. Yeah, question is, what kind of Chien Pao are you? Could also switch into Flutter right now. Like, the play I'm thinking about is switch into Flutter, Sacred Sword into Chien Pao. Because then Landorus has such a good matchup into Arcanine plus Salamence. I think the fear here is if they protect their Chien Pao and then Flare Blitz or Rock Slide. I think that's really risky because then I could have just clicked Stomping Tantrum onto your Arcanine slot, and I think you kind of have to cover for that. Okay. They do move first, but I think that's okay. It's going to be a really close finish, but I think with Landorus and Chien Pao, I feel decent. It's also a question of whether or not you have extreme speed on the Arcanine. They actually go for Rock Slide and miss, which I feel bad about. I think with that, I actually just immediately win the game, whereas if they had hit, then it becomes definitely trickier. Well, let's see. I don't know if I actually have this one yet, but the idea is, like, now, if you had hit the Rock Slide, at least then I would be extreme speed KO range. Although they could have clicked Flare Blitz, right? So I wonder if there's a reason why they didn't Flare Blitz. I think in this position, I'm just going to Stomping Tantrum Arcanine and Protect. I guess they could Protect Arcanine Tailwind, though, right? So maybe it's actually better to just attack and Sacred Sword here. Okay, I'm down with that. Yeah, they don't Protect either. Okay. Whoa! Oh my gosh, wait. What? They have Rocky Helmet and Will-O-Wisp on Arcanine. That's really cool, but that's really bad news for me. And Roost? Oh, that is... I did not see that coming. Whoa. We still do so much damage to Arcanine, though. I thought like it was just going to be fully offensive Arcanine given the Rock Slide. Oh my gosh, that's fascinating. That is so cool. Okay, well, we know you have Iron Head, so I'm kind of worried about that into... I might actually end up losing this game because of the amount of defense that they have now. Oh, that's so cool. Wow. That's an awesome set. And I would never predict that in best of one. I'm going to Stomping and see how much we do. So it's Tailwind, Dual Wing Beat, Iron Head, Roost. They did have Flare Blitz on Arcanine, so it's Flare Blitz, Rock Slide, Will-O-Wisp on that. Yep, okay, they at least double up on a Chien Pao, which is good. Get Stomping Tantrum off. It's pretty decent damage, honestly. But I have to deal with Rocky Helmet. Oh my gosh. That makes me think they don't have extreme speed, at least on the Arcanine. So, like, I want to just click Stomping again, and then just, Sacred Sword. Is it ever just double up on an Arcanine? Or sorry, on Salamence to just get the knockout onto it this turn? No, but Flare Blitz would just KO me, right? And I do less damage. Alright, I'm going to Sacred Sword Arcanine. I don't even know if -1 Iron Head KOs the Chien Pao as well. If we survive, I think we just win. Crazy endgame. Does it survive? On 8 HP. Wow. If they had hit that Rock Slide earlier, they would have won this game, I think. Because then it's Salamence versus Landorus, and then they could just Roost up. And with Burn plus Rocky Helmet, I wouldn't be able to win, but we got a very lucky dodge there. Yeah, honestly, my opponent deserved this game. I thought I was fine, mainly because I expected Salamence to just be offensive, and like Roost was something I had never even considered on that set. It just like felt like it was purely offensive, but with Rocky Helmet and Roost, you could see it actually has very good defensive potential. And I hadn't seen the Rocky Helmet, hadn't seen the Roost. So in my head, I was like, okay, well, Landorus should just be able to 1v2 Arcanine plus the Salamence. I also honestly just like, I feel like did not expect Will-O-Wisp on Arcanine because most people are running kind of the offensive sets on Arcanine, like a combination of Flare Blitz, Extreme Speed, Rock Slide, Tera Blast. And the fact that they actually had Will-O-Wisp and outsped Landorus meant that they could burn us. And so it's like they had all the tools here to win, and if that Rock Slide had hit the Chien Pao, I really think my opponent just wins this game. So this was a game where I got a lucky dodge, and that dodge 100% impacted the outcome of the game. So when you look at a battle like this, I kind of have to reflect on what I did wrong, and I think the main thing is my opponent just has had some awesome sets, right? In close team sheet, best of one, I'm never going to expect that from Salamence or Hisu and Arcanine, and that definitely caught me off guard. I mean, like, they had Sitrus Psychic Furgraph as well. I mean, Psychic is pretty standard, but the Sitrus plus the Steel Terra Tailwind combo was really cool. And I actually don't really have a way to deny Tailwind in this matchup. So if I were to play this matchup again, I think my adjustment would be potentially bringing Amoonguss. right? And just going for Water Tera immediately and Sporing. I think that would have been a really strong option. But very cool team there for my opponent. Okay, Golden Go, Flutter, Urshifu, Heatran, Rillaboom, and Tornadus. A slightly bulkier Torn team here. Golden Go is always really scary. Like, Tailwind plus Make It Rain immediately just puts on so much pressure. So I almost always lead Iron Hands to try to retaliate against that. Like, Iron Hands plus the Chien Pao. Water Urshifu is also really valuable in the back. I'm thinking Landorus. This makes me a little bit like, I would just love to bring Flutter, but they have 2 Steel types and Tailwind, which is scary. Plus Rillaboom, which is, if it's Assault Vestige, just can take our attacks pretty well. I think Amoonguss can be decent, but it's into a matchup with Torn, Rillaboom, Golden Go, and Heatran. Like, none of that gives me confidence. So I think this is an example of a matchup where, like, I think the Flutter and Amoonguss could put in a lot of work if I had some sense of which form my opponent will bring. And normally you're going to have a sense of that after a game 1 in a best of 3, for example. But in closed team sheet best of 1, I just don't feel confident enough in bringing those Pokemon. So, like, these 4 that I'm bringing, I think, at least give me more room to work with against all the possible sets. But that's one of the things that makes playing on the ladder with this team different than playing in, for example, the World Championships, right? They're going to go with Flutter and Golden Go. I think Water, Tera, and just Wild Charge turn 1 is pretty safe. Like, I don't hate that option. And while I protect this to scout out for what Golden Go wants to do. I think if Golden Go clicks Nasty Plot, though, on turn 1, this gets a little bit ugly. But I would expect Trick Specs most of the time. Could be Scarf as well, like I said. But I don't know how fast their Flutter main is, and I would expect it to be faster than Chien Pao. Or at least I want to like make that assumption until I see otherwise. And I think Protect just plus Wild Charge with that defense drop is fairly valuable. The question is whether or not it actually gets the KO, because a lot of Flutters run a good amount of bulk. They protect Flutter. Oh, nicely done. Okay. That was me maybe tunnel visually into Choice Specs, especially because I didn't see a booster energy. So it's probably Pixie Plate then, if I had to guess. What a turn 1 play by them. Wow. Phenomenally done. Felt like Choice Specs damage to me. If you're Specs, what you can do right now is Dazzling Gleam and then Tera this. Wow, that was I got hard red turn 1. That was beautifully played. Like, I figured that play was relatively safe because so many Flutters are Specs. And so I was like, okay, if you're Specs, even if you attack, it's fine. But that was just a hard read into my soul. Okay, I think I'm going to Icicle Crash and Wild Charge Flutter. I'd rather get Flutter out of the way. They just go for Gleam. They did not go for a Tera with Golden Go, though, so I did have the ability to just Sucker Punch that. But we're going to get Icicle Crash off. Is that Sashed? Ooh! The return of Sash Flutter main. Okay. Okay, and they Shadow Ball into Golden Go. I guess it could be worse. My main problem is I don't know the Tera on Golden Go either, right? So, in this matchup, like, I had to respect Choice Scarf on Golden Go. That turn 1 play was just so good, though, by my opponent, and sets me back pretty significantly. I will bring out Urshifu or Landorus. I think I'd rather bring out Landorus to put on pressure with Stomping immediately, but I think I'm really far behind in this game right now after that turn 1. Yeah, especially with Urshifu coming out. Like, can't you just Surging Strikes my Landorus? Oh, never mind. You're Dark Urshifu. Okay. That changes things. We could blow into this slot, seems likely. So I'm thinking of switching into Urshifu. and then Stomping Tantrum into Golden Go. Like I said, I'm really far behind in this game, so if I want to mount a comeback, I need to make aggressive switches, in my opinion. I can't just let my opponent safely get knockouts. They could very easily win this game this turn if they like double up onto Landorus, for example, with Wicked Blow Shadow Ball, but I think ignoring Iron Hands would definitely be a little bit surprising. But I think my turn one, it was a combination of things, right? Them making an amazing turn one play, also having Focus Sash on Flutter / the faster Flutter. All of that has led to bad news for me. And me not knowing what kind of Golden Go was going to be. Because Specs just does so much more damage, as you can see, into Iron Hands. Alright, they actually go for close combat there, which I guess I'm okay with for now. Life Orb close combat, huh? Golden Go is faster here. Okay. We do survive. Does Stomping KO in return is my question. Ah, it falls short. Okay. Our Urshifu isn't max speed either, so I would expect the Urshifu to be faster, which is the other part of the problem. Like, the main issue for me right now is all my Pokemon are just getting outsped by my opponent. I'm wondering if like, can I ever win the game if I just Aqua Jet here, right? That's the obvious play. But then they just knock out my Landorus. I guess then I get hands out at least. I'm going to Aqua Jet Stomping. Okay, they don't switch out Golden Go, so at least KO that. Still not looking great, though, because I assume you just Wicked Blow into Landorus now. Okay. Well, I would think Stomping KOs you now. You're at -2 defense, and you take in 2 hits of Life Orb. So what is their last Pokemon is the question. I need Stomping to KO right now. Oh, no way. Okay, well, with that, I think I lose. I might have lost anyway, but wow. That was so close. Oh my gosh, their last one was Heatran. Hands plus Landorus was perfect against Heatran. Okay, I could still win this. It's like Urshifu should pretty much always protect here, right? The obvious play for me to make right now is just Fake Out plus Stomping Tantrum. I guess that play is fine. I mean, you probably just double protect with both Pokemon is the problem for me. Ah. Tera Heatran. Grass. Bug. Yeah, that makes sense. And then protect Urshifu. Yeah. I should have just gone Fake Out onto the Heatran slot. Yeah, I think like you pretty much always have to detect there, right? I'm not sure I could have pulled it off with them having Bug Tera though in the end. Because it's like, I would click Fake Out into the Heatran, right? But then, like, at what cost? And then they'd have a Life Orb Wicked Blow. Maybe I could have won if it was 1v2, but with Urshifu surviving, then the game was definitely lost. Even if I had clicked Fake Out into Heatran that turn, I think it still would have been really hard. It's interesting they keep clicking Close Combat, though, instead of Wicked Blow, given that they're intimidated. But in this scenario, it doesn't end up mattering. Yeah, I think this game was won off a couple of things, right? Like, a really good turn 1 play by my opponent, them conserving their Tera all the way until the end here. Like, and with Bug Tera specifically, we just didn't really have too many ways to actually hit the Heatran, and it's not like I can really get good recovery from Drain Punch either. So, yeah, even if I had gone for the Fake Out play onto Heatran there, I'm not sure I could have gotten away with too much. But I think turn 1, my opponent just made a phenomenal play. Going for the Spec Shadow Ball onto the Iron Hands immediately. They had a great lead to counteract the Iron Hands as well. I'm wondering if Sucker Punch would have just straight up knocked out Golden Go, but I would have expected them to have enough bulk to survive. But if I had gone for like Sucker Punch, Wow Charge, Eliminate, Golden Go immediately, then this game might have looked a little bit different. But Sash Flutter was really strong for my opponent here. Okay, we've got Flutter, Dragonite, Urshifu, Amoonguss, Cresselia, and Ursaluna. Looks really similar to the team that finished in the top 4 used by European player Federico. So, what do we want to do here? I think Taunt from Urshifu is a really big deal, and Surging Strikes is just decent as well, but I have to worry about Rocky Helmet Amoonguss in my opinion. If they want to set up Trick Room, you could just lead Cresselia Amoonguss. To which I think I could go Flutter plus the Urshifu. I want Landers for the Intimidate onto Ursaluna. The last one's interesting because part of me wants to go Amoonguss to counter their Trick Room stuff. But the thing is, Amoonguss isn't actually that great into Cresselia and Ursaluna because of the threat of, like, one, I don't know if Safety Goggles is on Cresselia, right? And yeah, like, Ursaluna could just protect, activate the Flame Orb, and then I just can't put it to sleep the next turn. So that's one of the matchups that makes Amoonguss interesting. How much conviction do you have in going up against the Ursaluna? And also, like, I don't know the item on Cresselia, and I think a Goggles on that would be a nightmare, but they're going to go with the Flutter and the Amoonguss. Okay. So I want to go for a Grass Tera and then Shadow Ball Flutter while protecting Urshifu. I guess my question is whether or not Choice Spec Shadow Ball is a 2-hit knockout if they Tera defensively on turn 1. My guess is it's not, but I don't know how much bulk they have. Because they could very easily just go Fairy Tera turn 1 here, I think. Yeah. Fairy Tera Flutter main. In an ideal world, they don't Fairy Tera because they don't expect Grass Tera and they just Rage Powder and I just KO them before they even get to move. That would be the dream. And here's Grass Tera Flutter. Nice, okay. No Tera from their Flutter to start, so that's already good. I'm worried about Sash Trick Room now. Beautiful, they Rage Powder. This is why you use Grass Tera Flutter main. It's so good. Nice. No Sash. Oh, that's so good. Because now I can just taunt into the Amoonguss slot. I think it's actually really challenging for my opponent to come back from this. But obviously, I don't want to call the game over just after one turn. But just knowing that I have Taunt on Urshifu puts me in a really good spot. So, Grass Tera Flutter is just so nice. Let's see what they bring out. Cresselia, Urshifu, Ursaluna. Oh, okay. That makes sense. But against that, I'm happy to just taunt Amoonguss and then pivot out into Landorus right now. Get that Intimidate. We want to bait out the Tera from Ursaluna, but like, let's say they go for Ghost Tera now. Well, I can just Shadow Ball you in the end game. Taunt into Amoonguss is really good here. Basically, I would say... I was going to say forces a switch out, but they might leave Storm into Urshifu. So that's something to watch out for. But yeah, by switching out here, I get my Intimidate into Ursaluna. If it is not like Swords Dance Bulk Up Ursaluna, then I'm feeling really good. But even if it is, I think it's still fine given that early advantage that we were able to build up, plus being able to render the Amoonguss slot relatively useless next turn. And one of the beautiful things about taunting the Amoonguss is just that like I can just Surging Strikes the Ursaluna with full confidence next turn, right? Because you can't Rage Powder anymore, which is such a big deal. Okay, Ursaluna protects. Wonderful. Don't care about that. Taunt goes off into Amoonguss, so as long as you're not Mental Orb, this is fantastic. Beautiful. And with that now, I can double up onto the Ursaluna slot. Ursaluna probably Tera's here, right? I think you have to Tera. Tera Ghost, maybe. I think I do have to respect Pollen Puff coming out from Amoonguss onto Ursaluna after a Tera, and then they just Facade into Urshifu. But I think I'm still fine clicking Surging Strikes here and Stomping Tantrum. Like, let's just burst Ursaluna with damage right now and force the Tera out. I feel like I'm in full control of this battle right now. They actually switch Amoonguss out. Okay, maybe into Cresselia? Yeah. Crest actually still is going to pose some problems for me, right? There's the Tera from Ursaluna. Ghost, presumably. Ah, it's water. Okay, wait, that's actually going to be really good for them. The question then is, does your -1 Facade, if you're going for that, knock out my Urshifu? But that's a great play. I don't know why I indexed so hard on Ghost Tera there, honestly. That was kind of clumsy of me. Yeah, so that's a great Tera for them to have. They could definitely pull off a comeback with that Tera specifically. I was thinking, hey, if you're Ghost Tera, I still do so much damage with Stomping plus Surging Strikes plus Burn. Oh, interesting. They Facade Landorus, though. Okay. So that's a big deal. And the reason that's a big deal is because now I can just safely taunt into Cresselia. And Stomping Tantrum. I guess I should respect this being Mentor, though, huh? Do we think it's Mentor Cresselia is the question. It's actually kind of annoying to think about. I'm going to Surging and U-turn Ursaluna. Yeah, this works. So the idea here is, obviously they protect, but I still get Surging Strikes through the protect. I don't expect to knock it out, right? But the thing is, what is Cresselia going to do? If you click Trick Room, well, I can just Aqua Jet your Ursaluna next turn. And if you click Lunar Blessing, then I just attack you next turn anyway. So, yeah. Basically, I was like, I want to respect the option of them actually having Mentor Bunk Cresselia, because I don't know if they have it or not. And if they have it, that would cause some problems for me. So Trick Room goes up. Okay. And now I'm just happy to click Aqua Jet into Ursaluna. And U-turn into the other slot. I think your best bet would probably be to switch Ursaluna out into Amoonguss. But they don't. Cool. Yep, this is me taking advantage of Urshifu's absolutely crazy ability of being able to attack through Protect. And despite the Water Terror here, we're still able to finish off Ursaluna with a combo of Surging Strikes plus Stomping plus Aqua Jet, which is beautiful. Yeah, and they try to Lunar Blessing. Perfect. That was the main thing. I figured I could actually be in pretty bad shape if Cresselia had Mentor, and I just wanted to show respect to that option. But now you just really don't do enough damage with Cresselia plus the Amoonguss, and especially with Grass Tera, Flutter coming out. I think this turn 1, though, goes to show how valuable having this super fast Flutter main with Grass Tera and Choice Specs is, right? Turns out they were leftovers on Crest, so I could have just taunted there, but I don't regret the play that I made. Like, I covered for an option, and we're still going to end up winning this battle, right? So Amoonguss comes out. I'm happy to just protect here and then launch Shadow Ball into Cresselia. You could have Ice Beam and Pollen Puff onto Flutter, but I have such a big Pokemon advantage at this point, and Chien Pao is kind of just waiting in the back, so Amoonguss not really a problem, especially with Safety Goggles Landorus. Just going to try to target down Crest as quickly as I can. So let's see. What else can they do here? I think it's tough. Like, this duel just doesn't really do damage, and Ursaluna teams, like my opponents, generally index very heavily on sweeping with Ursaluna. Okay, I like this. Is it Helping Hand Pollen Puff? Because that's cool. I don't think that knocks out Flutter, but I am curious how much damage that does. It could be Leaf Storm as well. It is Pollen Puff. Okay, nicely done. That did a lot. That is definitely the most amount of damage I feel like you'll ever see an Amoonguss deal into a Flutter main. Okay. Honestly, pretty neat. Pretty neat. 2 turns of Trick Room. I'm happy to just Aqua Jet here. And pivot out into Landorus. And the game's almost over. It's like this duel's never actually going to deal enough damage, but with Flutter unable to protect here, I think switching is fine. Maybe Shadow Ball and Aqua Jet double up on a Crest is fine. Because, like, your Crest probably can't knock out Flutter. I actually think I like that play more. Yeah, stay in with Flutter. Because it's like, maybe you go for a Rage Powder with the Amoonguss here, right? Regardless, I think the game is over. I just don't think you can ever win from this position. But hey, if it's helping on Leaf Storm, that'd be kind of hype right now. This is why you want to still run Aqua Jet on the Urshifu, right? Having that priority to knock out the Ursaluna earlier was nice, and having priority to knock out Cresselia before it could get like an offensive attack off was also pretty nice. But yeah, they just Pollen Puff Lando. Cool. Now we can just go for double protect. Honestly, protect stomping is fine. I mean, Amoonguss is never going to win this endgame, obviously, so there's nothing they can really do. But I think the main thing in this game was just one, turn one having a huge lead, and then two, their team relies really heavily on Ursaluna, so being able to just chunk away at it pretty consistently. And this game showed the value of Taunt on Amoonguss, right? Because by going for the Taunt onto it, or I should say Taunt on Urshifu, because by being able to deny Amoonguss those Rage Powders, it meant that it could freely target the Ursaluna slot, which is really critical in this matchup. So, yeah. We got here very similar teams. The main thing to note is that they have Heatran and I have Landorus. Now, when you play matchups like this and you have similar Pokemon, you have to think, what are the ways that I can gain an advantage over my opponent? So I don't know if they're using the same sets, but basically I think one reason this team shines is because you generally are a little bit faster with Flutter main, which I think is a really big deal. I think Landorus being the difference between our two teams is actually also a really big deal. Like, Landorus has a really good matchup into their team. So I could lead something like Landorus plus Flutter main. This gives me an initial Intimidate immediately. Flutter puts on a lot of pressure. I think my main fear then is not knowing the Urshifu. If you're Choice Scarf with Surging Strikes, that can be kind of a problem. The other debate is what I want in the back. Hands is a weird one because it has a really good matchup into a lot of their Pokemon, but it's very bad into their hands and their Amoonguss. And if I Tera it, their hands can hit me for super effective damage. I think my main debate is, do I want Amoonguss in the back? And if so, then I can only bring one of Chien Pao and Urshifu. Which one of those two do I want to bring? I feel like Chien Pao is probably a must bring here. And I think Amoonguss because it gives me something to switch into their Urshifu. Because I think Scarf Urshifu otherwise may really sweep the top 4 Mons that I brought. But Amoonguss can cover for Scarf Urshifu a little bit better. So, let's see. I do think having Flutter here is good. I think having Safety Goggles and Grass Tera means that if they lead Amoonguss, we can make that Pokemon just absolutely miserable. It's one of the reasons why I think this team succeeded at Worlds. Having a lot of anti-Amoonguss I think is very important. It is just Chien Pao plus Urshifu though. Okay, I think this is pretty scary because I don't know the item on the Urshifu, and I think if it's Choice Scarf here, this might cause some problems for me immediately. The other question is, how fast is their Chien Pao? Because I'll tell you what, the play I actually want to make the most right now is Flying Tera, Tera Blast into Urshifu, expecting it to be Scarfed, and then switch Flutter out into Amoonguss. Especially because I got that Intimidate off into Chien Pao, so I'd expect to survive an Ice-type attack from that. This is actually really scary, and the main reason is because I don't know if you're Scarf Urshifu, but if you're Scarf, this is a nightmare for me, which is why I'm making this play. Okay, so I go for a Tera, meaning Urshifu isn't Terraing. The ideal scenario here is that we just Tera Blast and KO them, and they split their damage, and I survive both attacks. Ah, they just detect though. Okay. That's not ideal. So they're not Choice Scarfed. I showed that too much respect. Now they're going to just Ice Spinner me. Not enough for a knockout though. But that's pretty frustrating because if I just stayed in with Fluttermane and clicked Dazzling Gleam on turn 1, I would have been in amazing shape. But in closed team sheet without knowing the item on Urshifu, it really felt like they were Scarf based off how they led that game. So I can Rage Powder now. They can spin or Surging Strikes, but that's fine for now. The question is, do we think Urshifu switches out? I think a switch in into Heatran could make some sense. Heatran is kind of annoying to deal with, no? Okay, I'm actually going to U-turn Chien Pao, I think, and Rage Powder here. Yep, they switch. Is it Heatran? Because I thought about stomping that slot. Oh, it's actually Amoonguss. Okay. That's fine, I guess. You're going to spin her into me. I'm going to do a lot of damage to Chien Pao. Question is if I survive 2 of these with Sitrus. And the answer is yes. Okay, that's great. Didn't expect Amoonguss to just come in and take a Surging Strikes, though. Or sorry, Tera Blast. Like, if I had Tera Blasted the Amoonguss slot, Spored into Chien Pao, that would have been absolutely amazing, but I guess then they would have just Ice Spinnered into Landorus, so maybe not as amazing as I thought. What I'm going to do is, I think, bring out Chien Pao, bait the Amoonguss into a defensive Tera right now, and then just pivot right back out into Landorus right now. So we go out into Landorus. Thinking about just clicking Pollen Puff to get the knockout onto this. But Spore would cover for them switching, I suppose. Okay, yeah, I don't mind Landorus switching and then Spore into Chien Pao. The first turn itself just didn't play out super well for me, so I'm definitely playing from behind right now, but it's okay. Okay, so we bring out Landorus. By the way, like, if they don't get a knockout this turn and I put the Chien Pao to sleep, I'm going to be in super good shape next turn because I can just Pollen Puff and Tera Blast. Oh, nice. Okay, that works. What's Chien Pao going for? Spinner into Amoonguss? Oh, that's beautiful, as long as we don't get crit. Okay, that is super good for us. Nice. This is now where we can actually start healing pretty significantly. Like, this is where the combination of Pollen Puff and Regenerator is so strong. So I'm down to just Tera Blast Amoonguss right now, and then Pollen Puff into Landorus. I could probably target down the Chien Pao slot, because I guess that could switch in to, or they could switch out into Urshifu, for example, but I think with the Safety Goggles here, I just want to start dealing damage into Amoonguss. I think the main question is whether or not I should have like gone for a knockout here this turn, but Chien Pao does pivot out. Let's see what they go into. And this is where the Safety Goggles on Landorus is such a pivotal item, right? Because we just completely ignore Amoonguss right now. So we're going to Tera Blast. I wouldn't be surprised if they have enough bulk to survive this, but they're not going to be able to knock us out or put us to sleep in return. And is that Sash? Oh no, it literally just lived on 1 HP. Wow. Fine by me though, I get my Pollen Puff. And they're actually going to Pollen Puff into Amoonguss. Okay, that was cool. Now what? You could Wild Charge. Stomping into this is guaranteed, basically. Part of me wants to switch out into Flutter main, though, but it is kind of obvious, and I'm wondering if that's actually a good switch to make, knowing that Flutter is really well positioned in this endgame currently. I think double protecting is also acceptable here, no? Cool. That works. I was worried about like a switch and then a Pollen Puff, but yeah, I think putting the Chien Pao to sleep and dealing as much damage as I did onto it is really good. Amoonguss just Rage Powders, okay. Wild Charge into Landorus. Fine by me. So I want a U-turn here. U-turn into Amoonguss and then Spore into Iron Hands, I think. Nice. Yep, there's the Rocky Helmet, but that's fine. I think this game just goes to show, though, why, like, this team matches up well into the meta, right? Like, we're using Amoonguss, which is an absolutely crazy Pokemon in terms of strength, but we also have anti-Amoonguss answers with Goggles here on Landorus. So the question is, who do I want to go out into? At this point, Urshifu is in the back, and it is still healthy, but Flutter can just Energy Ball that slot, so I'd actually rather go out into Chien Pao right now. Like, I don't think the Sash is actually that important. They might Wild Charge that slot, but that's fine. We'll see if they target Amoonguss or Chien Pao here. Cool. Wild Charge into Chien Pao, so that's another Pokemon put to sleep now. Excellent. And at this point, like, I still have a healthy Flutter main waiting in the back, right? So I've disrupted my opponent pretty significantly. It's kind of waiting to just come out and clean up the battle. But Urshifu could definitely mount a comeback, so definitely don't want to count my opponent out of this quite yet. Okay, so they bring it out. So what do I want to do in this position? Spore into Urshifu. think I'm happy to just click Icicle Crash into Iron Hands and then Spore into Urshifu. What I'm kind of vying for right now is an end game where I just bring out the Flutter main and click Dazzling Gleam into everything, right? And my opponents let me put multiple Pokemon to sleep, and the idea here is that you can only knock out one of my 2 Pokemon with the Urshifu. I think you should knock out the Amoonguss, right? Because otherwise I'm just going to put you to sleep again. So there's Icicle Crash on a Hands. Really good damage. Here's Surging Strikes. Presumably into Amoonguss. Let's see. Yep. Okay. So they'll eliminate that, but that's fine. This now grants me a free switch in into Flutter main. His Hands takes a turn to sleep. Okay, so we bring Flutter out. I think the main tricky thing here is debating. I could obviously just Energy Ball Urshifu and Sucker Punch it. That's the play I lean towards the most. Because then Landorus Flutter should win from that angle. The debate is whether or not we think they try to protect Urshifu this turn. Because Urshifu could still definitely pull off a comeback right now. That's for sure. I could also go Dazzling Gleam Sucker Punch. But I think I'm down for the Sucker Punch Energy Ball play here. Nice. They don't protect Urshifu. Okay. I think that wins me the game then. They do correctly go for Aqua Jet, but even if they wake up with the Iron Hands now, it's still game over because their Chien Pao hasn't taken any sleep turns. So my Landorus comes out, intimidates both Chien Pao and Iron Hands, and I can just go for the Stomping Tantrum to KO the Chien Pao. And then Iron Hands isn't going to beat me 1v1 unless it has a Rogue Ice Punch. So the main play I was worried about that turn was the Detect from Urshifu, but it doesn't come out. And Hand stays asleep. Cool. I figure the odds are in my favor there because even if they end up going for a protecting move with the Urshifu slot, Iron Hands has only taken 1 turn of sleep, so the odds of them waking up immediately aren't that high anyway. But this works out even better for us. So turn 1 didn't go super well for us, but like I said, in this matchup, we had super similar Pokemon, so I try to ask myself, how do I give myself an advantage? And I thought Landorus would be the most critical Pokemon thanks to the fact that it does well into Heatran and it's got Safety Goggles for Amoonguss. So with this, now I can just go for Stomping Tantrum on Iron Hands and then just Energy Ball into Chien Pao. So Chien Pao takes its turn to sleep. And you can see how big of a deal the Sitrus Berry on the Amoonguss is as well, right? Amoonguss just survived for so long in this game. And the combination of that plus the Safety Goggles on Landorus meant that I never had to really worry about Amoonguss on the opposing side, which is such a big deal. So there's Stomping Tantrum. Hands does impressively survive. And they wake up, but at this point they can't knock out both Pokemon. So yeah, they'll faint from recoil here. And Landorus' bulk actually is enough for us to survive that wild charge. So this is definitely a scary game after turn 1, and this is what makes playing this team in a closed Team Sheet environment a little scarier because, you know, if it was open Team Sheet and I knew that it wasn't Scarf Urshifu, I'd probably be more inclined to just stay in with Flutter main turn 1 and just go for the Dazzling Gleam. But I wanted to show respect to Scarf Urshifu because I thought that set could absolutely destroy me if I played incorrectly against it. So that's the thing. Like, as I mentioned, I think this team is already really strong. I think it's obviously exceptionally strong in open Team Sheet environments. In closed Team Sheet environments, like, you just have to play more guessing games, and sometimes, like, you have to spend a couple turns just playing defensively in a way that I think isn't necessarily conducive for this team, but it's still obviously quite strong. And in this game, yeah, I was mainly just trying to show respect to the Scarf Urshifu on turn 1. But Amoonguss plus Landorus in the mid game was just super, super strong. We were able to heal up that Landorus with that single Pollen Puff, giving us so much more room to work with. And that's what this team does. You have incredible base stats across the board, but I'm happy to show off, yeah, how good the Safety Goggles combo with Amoonguss can be, because it just makes their Amoonguss really sad, right? Anyway, that's going to be it for this video. So thank you so much as always for joining me. I hope you enjoyed. Had a lot of fun with the games today, and I think we featured a lot of the different cool components of this team, including things like Grass Tera, Flutter main with the Energy Ball, as well as the Taunt Urshifu. So a huge congratulations to Shohei for becoming our brand new World Champion. Really appreciate you all, as always, for tuning into these videos. And if you appreciate it, would really mean a lot if you consider leaving a like on the video or subscribing to the channel. And I'll see you all next time. All right. Peace.